Have you ever met someone who speaks, and within the first 10 seconds, the entire room leans in? They don't shout, they don't use big words, they don't speak faster than everyone else. Yet somehow every sentence lands with precision. Every pause feels intentional. Every story sticks. When they finish talking, people don't just remember what they said, they remember how they made them feel. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if the difference between you and that person isn't intelligence? What if it's simply the way you communicate? Because here's the truth most people never hear. Being articulate isn't a gift you're born with. It's not reserved for politicians, actors, or motivational speakers. It's a skill. And like every skill, it can be trained. In fact, some of the most well-spoken people you've ever admired weren't naturally confident. They were awkward, nervous. They stumbled over words. They replayed conversations in their heads at night wondering why they said the wrong thing. Sound familiar? Maybe you've been in a meeting where you had a great idea but couldn't explain it clearly. Maybe someone interrupted you and suddenly your mind went blank. Maybe you've walked away from a conversation thinking, I knew exactly what I wanted to say, just not when I needed it. That feeling is frustrating, not because you lack ideas, because your thoughts are trapped behind words that refuse to come out. I remember watching someone answer a simple question once, nothing extraordinary about the question, but the answer, calm, clear, confident. They weren't trying to impress anyone. They were simply easy to understand. That's when I realized something. People don't admire articulate speakers because they sound smart. They admire them because they make complicated ideas feel simple. And that's exactly what you're going to learn today. But here's the first thing that will surprise you. The biggest reason people sound inarticulate has nothing to do with vocabulary. It has everything to do with panic. Think about the last time someone asked you an unexpected question. Your heart spat up. Your brain started racing. You began speaking before your thoughts were fully formed. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Too much information. Not enough control. Here's the strange part. The faster your brain moves, the slower your mouth should become. Read that again in your mind. The faster your brain moves, the slower your mouth should become. Most people do the opposite. Their thoughts accelerate, so their speech accelerates. The result, they ramble, they repeat themselves, they lose their audience. Imagine trying to pour water into a tiny bottle. If you dump the bucket all at once, most of it spills. But if you pour slowly, every drop lands exactly where it should. Your words work the same way. The next time someone asks you something difficult, don't answer immediately. Take one breath, one tiny pause. It feels long to you. To everyone else, it feels thoughtful. That single second changes everything. It tells your brain, we're in control. It tells your audience, this answer matters. Confidence isn't always speaking quickly. Sometimes confidence is being comfortable enough to wait. Have you ever noticed how experienced leaders answer questions? They rarely rush, they pause, they think. Then they speak. Not because they know more, because they know timing is part of communication. Now here's something even more interesting. Have you ever listened to someone who talks for 5 minutes without saying anything memorable? Then another person speaks for 30 seconds and everyone remembers it. Why? Because memorable speakers don't chase more words. They choose better ones. Imagine someone asks how your vacation was. Most people say, it was really good. That's forgettable. Now imagine someone says, it felt like my brain finally took a deep breath. The same meaning, completely different impact. Articulate people paint pictures. Your brain doesn't remember information, it remembers images. Instead of saying you're nervous, say your stomach feels like it's hosting a drum concert. Instead of saying you're busy, say your calendar looks like someone spilled coffee all over it. Instead of saying you're overwhelmed, say it feels like having 50 browser tabs open in your head. Can you feel the difference? One sentence informs, the other creates an experience. That's what makes people listen. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't need fancy language. You just need vivid language. The simplest picture is often the strongest one. But there's another habit silently destroying your ability to sound well-spoken. It's something almost everyone does. They try to sound intelligent. Have you noticed that? Someone learns a complicated word and suddenly every sentence becomes a vocabulary competition. The irony. The smartest communicators rarely try to sound smart. Their goal is something much more powerful. They want to be understood. There's an old saying I love. If you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it deeply enough. Think about your favorite teacher. Were they impressive because they used difficult words or because they made difficult ideas easy? That's real intelligence. When people leave a conversation thinking, whoa, I finally understand you've become unforgettable. Don't aim to impress, aim to clarify. That tiny shift changes your entire communication style. And here's something nobody tells you. Clarity creates authority. Confusion destroys it. Imagine two doctors. One explains your condition using 10 complicated medical terms. The other says, here's what's happening, here's why it happened. And here's exactly what we're going to do. Who do you trust more? Exactly. Simple isn't less intelligent. Simple is harder. Simple takes practice. Simple wins. Now let me tell you about something that changed the way I speak forever. Stories. Not because stories are entertaining, because stories organize chaos. Facts are isolated. Stories connect them. Imagine I tell you that preparation builds confidence. You'll probably not. Now imagine I tell you about a young man who avoided speaking up in meetings for years. Every time he had an idea, someone else said it first. He spent nights convincing himself he wasn't confident enough. Then he started preparing one thought before every meeting. Just one. One clear point, one example, one sentence. Within months, people started asking for his opinion. Did his intelligence suddenly increase? No, his preparation increased. Which created confidence? Which changed the way people perceived him? See the difference? Stories don't tell people what to think. They allow people to discover the lesson themselves. That's why you'll remember this story tomorrow, probably longer. So whenever you're explaining an idea, ask yourself something. Can I tell this through a story? Can I use an example? Can I compare it to something familiar? If you can, people won't just hear you, they'll remember you. Now, here's the final lesson. And honestly, it's the one most people ignore. Articulate people aren't obsessed with speaking. They're obsessed with listening. That sounds backwards, doesn't it? But think about your favorite conversations. Were they memorable because the other person talked non-stop, or because they made you feel understood? Listening gives you information. Information helps you choose the right response. When you're busy thinking about what you're going to say next, you're no longer listening, you're performing. People can feel that. Instead, become curious. Ask another question. Notice the words people repeat. Listen for emotions hiding beneath the sentence. Sometimes someone says,
"I'm tired."
What they really mean is, I'm carrying more than I can handle. When you respond to the deeper message instead of the surface words, something incredible happens. People trust you because they feel seen. And trust makes your words more powerful than any impressive vocabulary ever could. Have you noticed the pattern? Being articulate isn't about talking more. It's about thinking more clearly. It's about slowing down instead of speeding up. Painting pictures instead of listing facts. Choosing clarity over complexity. Using stories instead of lectures. Listening before speaking. None of these require natural talent. Only awareness, only practice. Imagine yourself 6 months from now. Someone asks you a difficult question. Instead of panicking, you pause, you smile, you gather your thoughts, you answer with a simple story and a clear image. The room becomes quiet, not because people are waiting for you to finish, because they're genuinely listening. That version of you isn't imaginary. It's built one conversation at a time, one pause, one story, one better sentence. And here's the part that excites me the most. Every conversation you have today is practice. Not tomorrow, today. The person serving your coffee, the friend you text, the coworker who asks how your weekend was. Every interaction is another repetition. Most people wait until the big presentation to improve. That's like trying to get fit during a marathon. The real transformation happens during ordinary moments, because ordinary moments create extraordinary communicators. So the next time you're about to speak, remember this. Don't ask yourself, how do I sound smarter? Ask yourself, how do I make this easier to understand? And that one question will separate you from almost everyone else. People may forget your exact words. They may forget the examples. They may even forget the conversation itself. But they'll never forget how you made them feel. If your words make people feel understood, inspired, and clear, they'll come back to hear you again. Not because you were the loudest voice in the room, but because you became the clearest. And in a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the person who communicates with clarity doesn't just win conversations, they change lives, starting with their own.